Chess friends, I have an incredible game to show you. It has just been played in the AI Cup. Game between Ian Nepomniachtchi with the white pieces and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave with the black pieces. And the winner of this mini match plays Magnus Carlsen in the final. So they are playing for big money. And it's something absolutely incredible what's happening in this game. Something I cannot recall having seen in recent times. Fantastic king walk. But you know, with king walks, it can go wrong horribly, but sometimes these king walks, they can just be heroic and it can bring you victory. Let's see how it is going to end in this game. A lot of things are happening. Just make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you would like to see more of these kind of exciting games, then I will show you what's happening right now. It's the Sicilian opening, e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Solid Rosso Limo variation, g6, castling kingside, bishop g7, rook e1. It's one of the main continuations. And here knight f6 was played. Now white normally continues here with a move e5 to go after that knight on f6. A lot of theory is there, but Ian Nepomniachtchi decides to just trade off the bishop for the knight. A very typical idea in these Rosso Limo structures as well. You get an imbalance. Bishop versus knight, damaged pawn structure. Black has to decide now how to recapture either towards the center or just away with the d pawn. Well, MVL goes for d takes c6. White plays h3. Very useful move. And here you would expect black just to castle. Very logical move. But instead knight e7 was played. Also typical idea with the plan of putting the pawn on e5 very soon, and later that knight will be rerouted via f8 to e6. All kind of standard ideas in this opening, but now white goes for the move e5 so that the knight is kind of blocked as well as the bishop on g7, but black goes knight f8, intending to come with a knight to e6. d3, knight e6, and white, having exchanged its light squared bishop, wants to place the bishop on b2 to further support that pawn on e5. Looks very reasonable, very easy to play as white. But in the long run, black has two bishops. And what you need to do with bishops is open the position. A move like f5 is very interesting here. If white would decide to take, you take back with the bishop. And the bishop is quite active on this diagonal. A lot of interesting ideas in the opening. We will definitely hear more from it in other videos, but castling kingside was played. Now white went for the move a4, knight d4 played, offering the exchange of knights so you can try to undouble the pawns. Also the bishop from c8 can be developed either to e6 or f5, knight bd2, bishop e6, bishop b2. Very logical way of developing. Both sides have completed their development. And we get a relatively quiet middle game you would expect. But let's see what's going to happen. b6 was played. Actually, I'm a little surprised by this move because I don't see any reason for black ever allowing this move a5. I think there was no need to play b6 here yet. Anyway, after a5, black needs to be careful. There's always a bit of pressure with the idea of taking on b6. Maybe later the rook on a8 can also become vulnerable, so white can try to win the file. If you try to close it with b5, well, it's knight e4, and the pawn on c5 is in big trouble. Now in the game they're followed queen d7, so the rooks are connected again. But now very interesting move, rook a4, maximizing the pressure against that knight on d4, which is attacked now 3 times. And okay, if white gets a chance just to take it, that's not looking great. If you take yourself on f3, then the 4th rank will be opened up for the rook to swing over to the king side. That's something MVL didn't really fancy. So he played b5. And now the rook says, okay, I'm going back. I don't care. I have weakened your pawn on c5 after bishop to d5. Black is putting pressure on the knight on f3. Note that white cannot really win a pawn by taking twice on d4, as there is bishop takes g2 with a discovered attack on the bishop. This is looking good for black. So white is not inclined taking that knight on d4. Played bishop a3, attacking the pawn on c5. Knight goes back to e6, protecting the pawn. And here knight e4 played. attacking the pawn one more time. And the way to stop it is b4. Now the bishop will come back to b2. You may even think to get the bishop back to c1, hoping the bishop can attack the pawn from another angle. But problem is that with the bishop on e3, black can always take on e4, and you're no longer able to take back with a piece. So therefore bishop b2 played, over protecting the pawn on e5, and white will shift the attention to the other side of the board. Maybe queen e2, queen e3, attacking the pawn one more time. Rook a1 can always be played. Black played f5, challenging the knight on e4. Very thematical play. E takes f6, e takes f6, and white played queen d2. So finally the rooks are connected. But here, I think very important and instructive moment, black could have gone for f5. This is the way to play such positions. You're opening up the diagonal. Black will allow the exchange of bishops. Now black will recapture with the queen. And the key idea is that, well, if knight goes away, you're ruining the structure by taking on f3. Know that you can never take on e6 because rook on a1 is hanging. If you take back, this is an awful pawn structure, which gives black the chance to attack it very soon. This is just analysis, guys. If the knight goes away, then I would like to keep the knights on the board, because these knights, they're hating each other. They are standing in the way. Black is about to follow it up with h6, and, well, probably you can still try to save your knights, but these knights, they're not making a great impression. Instead of playing f5, rook a8 was played first, rook a d1, and only now f5 played. Bishop takes g7, queen takes, knight eg5, and here again, I would say knight c7, with the idea to kick the knight from g5 is technically speaking a better idea. But MVL decides to take on g5, knight takes g5, h6, knight f3 back. And here, very interesting moment. Black has the choice between ruining the structure or keeping that very powerful bishop on the board. There's definitely something to say for a move like g5, with the idea to go g4, to attack the knight on f3, maybe open the g-file. There can potentially be a lot of pressure against the pawn on g2, which will be difficult for white to deal with. Anyway, bishop takes f3 was played, g takes f3. Both sides have ugly double pawns, but it's positioned with major pieces only, which means it's all about the king's safety. Let's have a look. Black played g5, revealing its plan of going for the throat here with the move g4. Rook e3 played, excellent idea. Black goes g4, and now the question is how to proceed here with white. If you take on g4, f takes g4, you can still try to keep the position relatively closed in front of your king. Rook de1 is coming next. I think this is a very subtle idea. In fact, they follow the move king h1. This is also very interesting, with the point being that after g takes h3, it's rook g1, and black is losing its queen because of the skewer. That's not good, of course. But here, queen g5 would be a nice move to keep some pressure against that rook on e3 and the queen on d2. The queen can try to find a way to sneak in. Very interesting. h5 was played, and now it's very important white doesn't play rook de1. Was played in the game. It's not a bad move, but much stronger. Instead of moving the rook to the e-file, you should start with moving the queen to the e-file. And the reason is that now queen g5 is no longer possible because the rook on e8 is hanging. Of course, black can take first on e3, but after taking with the queen, white is occupying the only open file. That's very important, especially in positions with major pieces only. The rook can decide whether to go to e1 or maybe to the g-file later on. White is dominating the position, but after rook de1, now the queen comes back to g5 and the rook is pinned. Rook on e3 can't move. If you take on e8, it's queen takes d2. Bye-bye queen. Queen e2 was played. Rook takes e3. Queen takes e3. And now difficult decision for black. Are you going to exchange queens here, giving white the control over the e-file? It's something which doesn't look very attractive, but objectively speaking, probably black is okay here. After taking on f3, white should take back on f3 at some point, otherwise the pawn is quite annoying. Later on the king will be active, should objectively speaking be a draw. But Queen h4 was played. This is the most ambitious move as you're attacking the pawn on h3. And now Queen e6 check is the most logical move in the position. But engines are ruining the game, our game. But they also come up sometimes with incredible resources. And now the best move is King g1. And you may think, what is this? You're just getting out of the h file. The point is that if you take on h3, now the queen comes in to g5 with check. If the king goes away, you enter with the rook on the 7th rank. This is going to be mate. White is winning the game for sure. You cannot take with your queen. If you do take with your g-pawn now, we have a very nice switch back. We are misleading the opponent here because we are not really planning to go to the center with the king. We want to go to h2. Now the king is safe here again, and the rook will come over, and we see that white's pieces, major pieces, are infiltrating, attacking the black king very soon. White would have won the game with the move king g1. Let's have a look what happened. Queen to e6, and well, this is practically very difficult. A lot of things can happen now. Where should the king go to? Maybe king g7 looks interesting, but rook f7 was played. Queen to g6 check. Now if you block with the rook, it's rook to e8 with checkmate. So the king got to keep the rook defended with the move king f8. And now another very important moment. Queen d6 was played. Interesting move, but not so good. Much better is to play f4 to keep the position closed. If you take on h3, I mean, black is a pawn up, but there are no good checks at all. And white is about to take over and to infiltrate with the rook on e6 or maybe on e5. Very difficult position. For instance, queen h4, queen h6 check. If king g8, it's rook e8 with mate to come. If you block with the rook, then rook e5. And white has the initiative, and with a number of checks, he should be able to win the game. Now, in the game, there followed queen d6 check, king g7, rook e6. Looks as if this is a deadly battery, and well, a lot of things are possible, including taking on h3. But in fact, it's probably not the best move, because after king g1, it's white who starts giving checks with the queen and rook, and well, the queen doesn't get the support from other pieces. There are some insane lines. But the best move in the game is queen takes f2. Was played by MVL, not minding rook g6 check. After king to h7, rook to h6, king g7, white can force a draw here. But considering the match situation, white had to play here for a win. Nepo lost the first game in a Petrov opening. He had to bounce back with the white pieces, so he continues the game with the move queen g6 check, king f8, and it looks as if white is very close to victory with queen and rook in the attack. King e7, queen g5 check. Looks very dangerous, as if the king goes away, there could follow a check on the back rank. If you block with your rook, it's queen g7. If you block again, it's queen e5, king d7, queen e8, king d6, rook h6 check. If you go to the 7th rank, it's queen takes f7 with check. If you come forward, it's queen d8 check. If you go king e5, it's queen d6 with checkmate. Difficult to find it all. Not for these guys. They always are looking for the forcing moves. Anyway, rook f6 is not a good move. You better run away with your king. And that's of course very understandable. And it's difficult to say what white should do here. You can take the pawn on g4 anytime, but know that at least black can play here queen f1, and after king h2 you go back with the queen to f2. That's a repetition of moves. So white has to continue. Played here the move queen to d8. Where do you go with the king? Well, if you go king e6, it's rook h6, king e5, queen d6 with checkmate again. That's not good. The king has to be brought up the board here with the move king e5. Now there are a number of checks available with the queen, with the rook. In the game, rook e8 was played, but first let's have a look at this move. If you play the move queen e8, it's a double attack on the king and rook. The king comes to f4. If you take the rook now, then it's queen f1 check, and after king h2 is g3 with checkmate. Thanks to the help of the king, it's checkmate with a pawn. Black is winning the game. Let's go back. Queen e8 is not good. How about queen b8 so that the king cannot walk into white's king side. Well, in that case, the king goes into the other direction, king d4. You can give another check with your queen, but after king c3, the checks are over very soon. Queen e5, king takes c2. The king is absolutely safe. The black king is safe. The queen and rook, they're too far away. There are no checks, and black is having more pawns and is about to deliver a devastating mating attack with ideas of taking on f3 or advancing the pawn to g3. So that's not good either. Rook e8 was played in the game, but now the king comes to f4. It's the only square for the king. Now the question is what to do next. There are not that many checks available. Queen d6 was played in the game, but now you take the pawn on f3 and look at this king. It's standing in white's position. The threat is queen g2 with checkmate. White can only give one more check. Queen takes c6. King goes to g3. Now it's either mate on f1 or h2. Queen d6 was played. And now it's f4. The checks are over. And this is the winning king walk. The most amazing king walk of this year, I would say. I mean, we all know the king walk of Nigel Short against Jan Timman. Very famous game. There are a lot of other famous king walks. I like this one as well. But okay, we have to say that objectively speaking, in the middle game, black also had some very suspicious positions, and we managed to escape. It was a brilliant king walk. Well done to MVL. He qualified for the final rematch against Magnus Carlsen. Let's see what's going to happen in that final. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click, subscribe to the channel and like this video, and then I'll be back with more coverage of brilliant games like this ones.